Hey guys, welcome back to more family drama stories. In this video, I got police to arrest my parents because they put me $30,000 in debt. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. So I spent my first year at university commuting back and forth, and it was a total nightmare. It was about an hour each way unless I hit traffic, which I normally did, so it meant waking up super early and rushing and coming home late and exhausted. Spending all my money on gas and then having to listen to my parents lecture me like I was still in high school. My school was in a city and had limited dorm space, basically reserved for students that didn't live in state. A lot were foreign students since the school had some kind of program. The bottom line was dorms were not an option, and another year at home did not seem like it was gonna be much better. I was working part-time and figured that if I got roommates, I could get an apartment much closer to campus. My parents seemed against the idea, telling me I was wasting money and just being lazy by not wanting to commute. My dad even asking if I got a job an hour away, would I refuse it just because I didn't want to bother. They didn't see my side of things, but I didn't care and made up my mind as an adult. I found an apartment and had enough for the down payment. I would only need to get one roommate too, which was even better for me. I got a call thinking it would be them telling me everything was fine, but instead telling me that my credit score was too low. I asked them for it and was shocked that it was horrible. I didn't know why either, because I didn't take out a loan for school and I only used my credit card for emergencies and always paid it on time. I got referred to my bank and went in to try and figure out why it was so low. They started pulling out records of cards that I never got, which had lists of purchases I had never made. At first I thought somebody stole my identity, but the closer I looked, the more the purchases looked familiar. Restaurants my parents always went to, the new TV they got for the house, and other things that I knew they had bought and not questioned where they got the money from. In total, I was $30,000 in debt, and my credit would take years to rebuild even after that fact. I was beyond angry and went home to confront them about what happened. At first they tried to lie and say that they didn't know about it, but I went into my mom's bag and took out her wallet and found 2 cards in my name. Me, if you don't know anything, then what are these? Mom, it's not what you think, sweetie. We needed the money. Me, how long have you been taking out cards in my name? And don't lie, because I can go to the bank and find out for myself. Mom, it hasn't been that long. Dad, we've been using your name and social on cards since you were a kid. Me, are you kidding me? My credit is destroyed because of what you did. I was crying and yelling but couldn't help it or care about being polite to my parents. They tried to explain that their credit was bad and used my name in order to get a card. They had been paying it off until a few years ago when payments got slower and then stopped. Then they would close out the card and open a new one, further damaging my credit. Claiming that they planned to fix things before I found out, and if I had waited to move out then I wouldn't have known. They really thought that deception and just being able to hide it from me was gonna make me feel better about it. I told them that I was going to find a way to move out without them, and they started calling me selfish and not caring about my family. A classmate from the term before that I made friends with had an apartment and was willing to have me be her roommate if I paid cash. I know it's bad because it meant that she could easily kick me out, but it was all I could do without having a credit check happen. I clearly did not have the money to get me out of debt, and my parents told me that since I moved out, they were not planning on repaying the money anymore. It was in my name, so it was my problem, they told me. My roommate was studying some pre-law classes and told me that she asked the professor about fraud and if parents ever opened cards in the kids' names, and it turned out that this was not as rare of an issue as I thought, and many parents did this. The only difference being most of those parents were struggling and using the cards in order to pay for food or rent or other important things. My parents just used it like free money though. Despite what my mom said, they didn't need it, and almost all the purchases were just for them to get nice things or have a good night out. I was able to get in contact with a lawyer that took on cases for free since I had no money. One of those, if you win, then they get a cut type. I wanted to find out if there was anything I could do, and it turned out I had 2 courses of action I could take. It would basically mean losing my parents since they would never speak to me again, but I did not care about that. They did not feel like my parents anymore anyway. I both sued them for the $30,000 plus suffering from the fact that my credit was ruined. I also pressed criminal charges against them for fraud, which the police and district attorney took care of. As for the civil case, I had texts with them of us arguing about the money as proof, as well as dated things showing the cards being taken out started when I was really young. Clearly, I did not do that myself, and they were the ones doing things behind my back. All of this also went to the police, and they ended up getting arrested in the process of all of this. They were forced to pay me the money, but during the whole case I was getting calls and messages from other family members like aunts and uncles, and they all sided with my parents, claiming that I was ruining the family and trying to make me feel worse than I already did. I refused to drop the charges or stop my case against them though, and instead blocked my extended family as well. I got the money to get myself out of debt and to pay my lawyer so I would not end up in a totally different debt. My credit was still horrible though, and the only thing I could do about that, ironically, was use my own credit card and make good payments on that to slowly build it back up. For criminal charges, they were in some serious trouble, that they did not have any bargaining chips aside from trying and failing to get me to drop the charges against them. They ended up behind bars, and I think they were shocked about what they did. They truly felt and believed that they had the right to use my name and social security number to open cards on my behalf despite me being a child. I know part of the problem is the system that allows this kind of stuff to go through without a red flag shooting up. It should not be possible to open cards in the name of a literal child, but that is a battle for somebody a lot bigger than me. I can only try and fix my own life while trying to cope with basically not having a family anymore. A hard decision, but I needed one since my parents were in jail and the entire family now hates me because of it. And the next one is titled, "Am I the a-hole for not wanting to date a police officer?" I did not know where to post this on legal advice because I'm not sure it's gotten to that level yet. 2 months ago there was a domestic dispute in my building. I, 25 female, was coming home when I noticed 2 police officers waiting for the elevator. I would have waited for the next one, but we only have 2 elevators and one was broken. I rode up with the officers and I was surprised to see that we all got off on the same floor, aka mine. Apparently the disturbance was the unit next to mine. I've only lived here for 3 months, so I don't know any of my neighbors. I didn't think too much of it at the time and I went into my unit and closed the door. About 30 minutes later, I hear a knock at my door. It was one of the police officers that I had ridden up with on the elevator. He asked me to open the door, but I was hesitant, so I asked if we could just talk through the closed door. He showed me his badge through the peephole to, I guess, make me feel safer, but that did not help. He told me that he needed to see my identification because I might be a witness to what occurred in the unit next to mine. I told him that I saw nothing, so I would not be a big help. He told me that either I talk to him now or I have to go to the police station in the morning, which could take all day. I'm a student, I could not take off a whole day to talk about an incident, so I agreed. He did not come inside my place, we just chatted at my door. He asked me for ID, so I gave him my driver's license. He wrote down my information, my number as well, and told me that he would be in contact. 2 days later I spotted him at my building after coming home from class and he asked me how my neighbors were doing and I said fine, and tried to get into my building. He stopped me and said that he thought he and I had chemistry the night we met and he asked me out. I told him that I had a boyfriend, lie, and I sidestepped into my building. The next day, I get a call from my grandma and she tells me that a nice police officer came by and was asking very personal questions about me. The person she describes sounds exactly like the police officer who asked me out. My license has my grandma's address. I was living with her before and I have not had time to go and change it. Honestly, at this point I was freaking out. I told her not to talk to him and not to answer the door if he comes back. 2 weeks ago, I'm walking home from class and I jaywalk to get to my building. I hear someone calling my name, so I turn around and it's this police officer again. He tells me that he could fine me for jaywalking because it's illegal, but he won't if I go out with him. I told him again that I'm seeing someone, but he tells me that my grandmother told him that I was single. I told him that it's a new relationship, so she would not know. He said that he would hold off on the jaywalking ticket, but not for long. It's been a few weeks since that confrontation, but I see him pretty often. I live in a safe neighborhood, but he seems to always be parked somewhere near my school or apartment building. I'm on a student visa, I'm Canadian, and I cannot afford to have a ticket on my record, but I'm also very worried that this police officer guy will escalate the situation if I don't go out with him. I told one of my closest friends about this, and she told me that what this police officer was doing was romantic and I am an a-hole for not going out with him. Yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this. I would say that OP's closest friend is a total idiot because this police officer, in my book at least, should not be a police officer. He's clearly abusing his status and exploiting it, and he is a total creep. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Relevant comments: you should report him for blackmail and harassment since he's using his position to coerce you, otherwise this would not involve his employer. You do have your grandma as a witness and they can pull up his vehicle vehicle and cell phone data to corroborate your story. As far as USCIS and CBP go, I doubt they deport you for jaywalking. OP then answered, "Hey, thanks, this makes me feel better legally. Do you know if it matters that he has evidence of me jaywalking multiple times?" I cannot seem to find any info on that, and he told me jaywalking multiple times leads to higher fines. Then someone commented on reporting him, "True, although I would be willing to bet his cop buddies would cover for him." OP then said, "I'm in a small college town below 50,000 people, and he shares the same last name with 2 other cops that I found on Facebook, all in my area. That's why I am a bit hesitant to report it." And now we got an update to the story, and it goes like this. So I just wanted to start off by thanking those who responded to my last post. Most of you were very sympathetic and stressed that I needed to do something because this was not gonna resolve on its own. Honestly, I did not realize it had gotten so bad until I read my own post. I got a few horrible DMs after I posted a few days ago, so I hid out for a while. I didn't want to be too specific in my last post, but I realized that my vagueness made it harder for people to give me advice. So I'm located on the East Coast in a small college town with below 50,000 people. There are less than 60 police officers, and from social media accounts I was able to find 2 other officers, brother and cousin, that shared the last name of the officer who has been begging me to date him. I first interacted with the police officer in late March/early April, so this has been going on for a couple months now. Some of you were concerned about my grandma. After the officer paid her a visit, she moved out in May, which is why I moved out. She lives in a senior's home hours away from me now, so she is fine. The campus is pretty much empty now that spring semester finished in May, my friends are gone, and the only reason I stayed for the summer was because I secured a student research position. I'm kicking myself now for staying, but there was no way I would pass up on this opportunity. The morning after I wrote the post, the officer came knocking on my door. He kept singing my name while he knocked, really creepy. I did not answer. He came back a few hours later, and I'm ashamed to say that I hid in my apartment until Monday morning. I was planning on calling the domestic abuse line in my area, which was a great suggestion some of you gave, but I think his visit frazzled me. He had never gone as far as to knock on my door again after that first night we met. I walked to campus yesterday morning, and I was still really alert and scared. I ran into one of my professors from last semester, and she could see that I was not okay, so she took me to her office. It all came tumbling out after that. I told her everything about what had been happening, and she was super sympathetic. I told her the officer's name, and she did not look surprised at all. According to her, he has done this before to multiple women. Some women have filed complaints, but nothing has happened because his dad is well connected. The officer has a pattern of escalating once complaints are filed. I told my professor that I was planning on seeking out the victim advocacy group, but she cautioned me against it. Apparently, when spring semester ends, a lot of people take the summer off, and the offices are staffed with locals. The sister of the officer that has been harassing me currently works at one I was thinking of calling. She stayed with me while I called another advocacy group a bit further out of town. She also connected me to a lawyer just in case, also out of town. The professor got her son, 23 male, to walk with me to and from campus. I felt guilty about that, but he said he was glad to help. My professor told me that the officer targets women who live alone and seem to be alone all the time, which is definitely me this summer. This will be my last update, but I just wanted to thank everyone for giving me the strength to tell someone. And yeah, Ripestars, I gotta say, I have so much empathy for this poor young woman. She should not go through this at all, especially when it comes from a police officer. This guy should be protecting people and not be creepy and make people feel unsafe. Absolutely unacceptable, and sadly, there are really no further updates to this story, but I only wish OP the best and I hope nothing further happened. The only thing I hope is that this guy got fired and won't be a cop any longer. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. When you live in a rural area like I do, you tend to create bonds with neighbors that you have lived next to for a long time. Heck, some of this land stays in families for generations and you really know the people living near you. This was my case at least, and I don't know if it is just a Polish thing or if it is like that in other countries. So yeah, Ripestars, this story takes place in Poland. Anyway, the neighbor that lived next to me was a sweet old man that never had children and whose wife died a few years back. He unfortunately followed about a year ago, and I was devastated that I was never going to see him again. For a few months his land was abandoned and I was waiting to see who was going to buy the land and be my new neighbor. I even rode my lawnmower through his land after he died, both out of habit since I'd been helping him and to keep the lawn nice for the people that newly moved in. There is no fence on that part of the property, so I was able to just keep going while I did my own. The new neighbors moved in at long last, and I could tell right away that there was something a little off about them. I don't remember exactly when in the chain of events I pieced together they were squatters, so I will just put that fact here. They had gone onto the empty land illegally to live without having to pay rent or mortgage or anything. When I figured that out, that was when I really decided I did not like them, instead of being just a little put off by them. It got worse though, because they decided to tear down the house that the old man had lived in his entire life. It was an old wooden house that is not really a kind people built anymore, since it was really old and part of his family. The fact that they tore something down without owning it is one thing, but then they built the new one very close to my property instead of where the old house stood. Even though I just said all of that stuff about them, I'm going to label this next section of the story where the problems really begin. They wanted to build a road from the main road up to where the new house was. We never really had roads, just areas of dirt that were worn down from being the spot we drove over. Since there was no fence and they did not buy the property, it was clear that they had no clue where the property lines were, and when I saw their new road, I found that almost all of it was actually on my property and not on theirs. And I mean, by their property, OP obviously means the property they are squatting in. Anyway, again, they had all of this room but decided that they wanted to live right on top of me for some reason that I don't understand. The last thing they did finally made my light bulb go off in my head as to why they were doing this. I hadn't been paying much attention, but I was doing research on squatters in the little free time I had. One thing that always came up was how the quality of life was bad because they did not have any electricity or gas. My new neighbors though had electricity because I could see at night that their lights go on. I went outside to investigate and saw an extension cord that was hidden under dirt under their road and under more dirt until it reached their house. They had been stealing electricity and leeching off of me this entire time. I was furious and wanted to go and yell at them, but decided I was going to fight smarter, not harder. Obviously, the first thing I did was unplug them and get an outlet cover that I could slip a lock into. Now they had no way to steal my power, but I was not going to end there. Some of you might be wondering why I had not called the police or anything on these people yet, and that was because I wanted to finish doing my research on who to call up and what would be the best place. Anybody who ever read stories about squatters knows that calling the police usually does not get rid of these people, at least in my country. Instead, I called different departments of the town regarding illegal structures, buildings and illegal road building. I knew they were going to ask for ID and a deed to the house that these people never had in the first place. Sadly, I was not there to see any of these visits, but I was there to see the outcome of the entire thing. My guess is that the inspectors came and saw that they illegally torn down a house, built another one without a permit, built a road on my property without permission or a permit, and of course did not own any of the property they had messed with. The police were by the house when I got home, and since I was so close, I could basically hear the entire thing. They were under arrest for all the violations and they would get a court date. I had to go one of the days to talk about how the road was on my property, and I saw that they were the ones to destroy the building after the old man had died. It had cost them way more money than they had, and the town ended up needing to pay to destroy the illegal home and road. You might be thinking they got off a little bit easy, but there is something else to this story that I could not help but think was hilarious. Like most countries, you cannot just randomly live there without a visa or anything that says you are in the country for a reason. So these people came over to Poland as visitors, so they had no legal right to stay and try and live here. Hence no ability to actually buy a home and become squatters instead. This meant that they ended up having to be deported back to their country instead of just going to jail or anything. Since they have a record in this country though, they will always come up with a red flag if they try to come back for any kind of reason. I understand wanting to immigrate to a new country, and of course I am biased and think mine is a great place to want to move and live to. Now, they don't even have a chance to do things the right way because of all the chaos they caused trying to live here under the radar. Honestly, I think it's better that they don't become a part of this community with how they acted. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.